Thank you for visiting Past the Wire TV, the YouTube channel of PastTheWire.com.
Dan Oman here with some exciting news. DRF Formulator, the gold standard in past performance information, is now free, exclusively on DRF Bets. Join DRF Bets with the promo code WINNING. Get a $250 first deposit match bonus, a $10 free bet, and free Formulator already uploaded to your account. Access Formulator's premium features, including sortable trainer stats, race replays, personalized trip notes, and lots more. Free Formulator, exclusively on DRF Bets.
It's 1,000 words fighting back, coming down to the finish. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, this is one stunning picture.
1,000 words just in front. 1,000 words wins the Robert B. Lewis.
Honoree P is full out now, second on the outside, and they're coming down to the line, and 1,000 words has done it.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Past the Wire TV. I'm excited to be here today with somebody I consider a friend, Michael Wilson. We're here to talk about a new venture that Michael is launching that I myself believe in and I'm hoping to be a part of and work with them. I think it's an exciting concept. I think you're going to enjoy hearing about it and learning about it. And some of you may even want to get at some point involved in it and see a little bit more about what it's about. So, Michael, welcome to Past the Wire TV. Congratulations on the launch of Forza, which we'll talk about in a minute. But thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me, John. It's always fun chatting with you, and yeah, no, excited to talk about it and racing as usual.
Yeah, no, I'm excited about the concept. I think there's a bigger need for it than most people would realize, but we'll get into all of that in a minute. You know, one of the things, and you know, I've always believed in you since you went out on your own, which is when I first came to know you. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think that Past the Wire was one of the first, if not the first, publication to write about you when you launched your career in training after being an assistant. I'm not sure of that, but I think that we were the first or one of the first.
No, you guys were definitely right on it. So no, I appreciated that.
Yeah, no, I've always believed in you. And one of the things, and I'll start the conversation with that, because one of the things I thought was really strong on your CV or resume was your background before you started training and some of the people that you learned from and worked with and under. So why don't you tell us a little bit about some of the people you worked under and worked with and you know how you learned from some of those guys, which is a pretty strong resume.
Yeah, no, it's long, so I'll try and condense it. So yeah, no, I guess I was really lucky early on. I kind of got into the horse business late, probably got in around age 18. My father, who you'll see on our website, is an equine veterinarian, so kind of was around horses, but didn't really fully jump in. And then once I jumped in, you know, my goal was to try and be the best I could be. And so I quickly set out to try and work for the best in the business and, you know, started walking hots for third generation, very good horseman named Marty Jones. You know, his father's Gary Jones and grandfather's Farrell Jones. And then my father bought me a DVD one year called On the Muscle. It's a 3-series DVD on Richard Mandela. And it kind of follows It follows Joe Har a little bit. It follows the Tin Man a little bit, which is kind of funny watching that DVD and then actually getting to work with the Tin Man when he was older. And then also another horse he had called Redditori. So it kind of followed it, and I watched it, and I was completely enthralled. And I said, wow, like, this guy's amazing. I need to go work for this guy. So I asked my dad, I said, do you know him or know anybody who does know him? And he says, well, I might know somebody who might have his phone number. And I said, okay. So he contacted a colleague, Dr. Rick Arthur, who was Richard's vet at the time. And Rick gave me Richard's number, and I picked up the phone and just cold called Richard. I had to really work up the guts to do it. I was pacing around the university campus before I called him. And he picked up the phone on like the third ring, and I told him, hi, I'm Michael Wilson. I really want to work for you. And he's like, that's great, but can you tell me a little bit more about me or you? And I said, yeah, no, I'm hot walking for, Marty Jones and groomed for Marty Jones. And I really want to kind of come over and work for you. You don't have to pay me. If money's a thing, don't pay me. I'll work for free. I just want to learn from you. So I said, well, I got to fly to Dubai, and I've got to run a horse in the World Cup undercard. I think he was taking the Tin Man over there to run. And he says, I'll be back. So 2 weeks later, I drove down to Santa Anita, and I was standing outside the barn, and he returned from Dubai, I think the day before, and I introduced myself, and that's kind of where it all got started. So worked for Richard in between my breaks from UC Davis, because I was up north studying equine animal science at UC Davis, which I got a bachelor's in. And I would go to Richard in spring, summer, fall, and then I'd go for Christmas break too. I'd work in the barn as kind of initially I did some grooming, and then I was made the foreman. And so we would be bouncing around, helping run horses, and just really learning hands-on from him. I said I'd make this short. So then after that, I said, well, Richard's so phenomenal with older horses, and, we had some very good 2-year-olds. We won some grade ones with 2-year-olds, but I wanted to learn more about the claiming game and how that functioned, because Richard didn't claim a whole lot of horses. So I kind of pegged Doug O'Neill since I was in California. Right. And I went over to Doug. I asked Doug for a job, and Doug made me an assistant trainer in the barn. So I was at Doug probably 4 to 5 months, 6 months. And then Doug had a string at Fairgrounds that wasn't working out, and that barn then shut down. So he had 3 assistant trainers in one barn. And Doug's like, look, you were the last one in. And I said, okay, I understand. So it was kind of a blessing in disguise, because I walked right into Bob Baffert's barn. I was 22 years old. Bob said, I got to send Jimmy to Dubai for 2 weeks. And you can come in and help out at Santa Anita while Jimmy's in Dubai. So I helped out for 2 weeks, and maybe it was just a reason that he could fire me at the end of 2 weeks if I was no good. So at the end of 2 weeks, when when I left Doug's at the same time, I applied for the Flying Start course. So I started with Baffert, and a week in, I get a call that I have an interview for the Flying Start course. So
that's the Godolphin program, correct?
Yeah, right now it's Godolphin Flying Start. Back then it was Darley Flying Start.
Gotcha.
So I tell Bob, I'm like, I've got to go to Kentucky and do this interview. And he says, whoa, I want to send you to Sunland Park and run some horses in the Sunland Park Derby and Oaks. I'm like, oh, well, you said you only need me for 2 weeks. He's like, no. He says, you're going to go to Sunland Park. So I had to call the Flying Start and say, can you push my interview? You have me for Saturday. Can we do it Sunday? I've got to go to Sunland Park to run some horses. So went to Sunland Park, ran 4 horses. One of the fillies went wire to wire by 16. Her name was Gabby's Golden Gal. She then ran in the Kentucky Oaks against Rachel Alexandra. And then Victory, I can't remember her name. She ran second. So we ran 1-2 at the fillies, and then the boys, Mayor, Marvin, Mythical Power ran 2-3.
I remember that race Gabby's Golden Girl ran. I remember watching it on TV.
Yeah, no, it was neat. It was kind of funny because the couple days, obviously, initially with Bob, I spent most of my time in the barn, helping get the horses ready. We had Pioneer of the Nile getting ready for the Derby. We had Sensational in the barn at the time. Indian Blessing was in the barn as well. And so I was kind of in the main barn at Santa Anita. and I hadn't seen Gabby's Golden Gal train. So before I left, I'm like, can I go to the racetrack and watch her for a couple of days just so I can get to know her and see what she's like, so I can tell you if anything's different when we go to Sunland Park. So we go to Sunland Park, and Bob calls me, says I'm going to be there for breakfast, and the owner, Arnold Zetcher, will be there as well. I said, okay. He says, what do you think of the filly? I said, I think this filly wins, hands down. They said, what do you mean? I said, well, at Santa Anita, she used to kind of gallop off the bridle, and she was kind of just relaxed. I said, here, she just drags the rider around the racetrack. I said, she's been here for 5 days. She seems completely different and is on her A game. And then, you know, she went out and did what she did. So off of that, Bob then said, you're now the assistant trainer at Hollywood Park. I said, okay. So he sent me over there. When was this? This was April. So I was 22 years old. And we had 40 horses at Hollywood when I started over there, and I was asked to find 20 more stalls. So I talked to other trainers. We found 20 more stalls because we had the babies coming in. So we ended up, I had 60 horses that I kind of trained over there for Bob. Bob would come over every couple of weeks and check on them. And then I ran everything out of there because the meet, when it shifted to Hollywood, I pretty much saddled most of the horses and ran them out of there, which is then how my relationships with some of my future clients started, like Zayat Stables, you know, because we had horses for him in that division. And then, you know, a horse who's a stallion here in Kentucky now would be looking at Lucky. I had him for 2 weeks over there before we ran him in his, you know, inaugural start. So, yeah. And I guess we're not even halfway through the CV, but we can maybe pause.
No, yeah, and you know, this is a problem when you and I talk, and has been over the years. It's when you have two people that are passionate about racing and passionate about the sport and happen to know a little bit about it, which I think we both do. We could wind up talking till, you know, 9 o'clock tonight and saying, wait, we got to go, you know, and never get to Forza. So we're going to have to get to Forza. So let me try and move it a little bit, because there are some things I think we need to get out there.
So I'll speed up 2 things. Just, I don't mean to cut you off. So to finish it up, went from Baffert, did the Flying Start program, Kenny McPeak, and then went out on my own. Was an assistant.
But you do have, correct me if I'm wrong, some experience abroad. Is that through the Flying Start?
Yeah. Okay. So when
Talk a little bit about that, because I think that's some valuable knowledge to bring to the table that a lot of people don't have. And I think, maybe I'm wrong, but I think things are a lot different over there than they are over here. So talk a little bit about that.
No, for sure. I think more so the time I spent overseas probably really shaped the way I trained. When I got over there, it was completely eye-opening. I mean, all I knew was what I knew, which was from the US. And so when I got on the course, I asked the course manager, Claudia Kavanagh, if I could spend time with trainers as much as I could. And she said, look, if you can find time, you know, the program is typically from 8 a.m. to you know, 6 p.m. at night most days, but if you can, whatever time you can find, go for it. So when I went to England, I don't even know, she gave me the number for Jeremy Nasita. So I went over to Jeremy's barn, and I'd get up at 5 and I'd be at his barn at 5:30, and I'd put in 3.5 hours before everybody else on the course actually got up to do the coursework. So I spent a lot of time with him on the gallops in Newmarket,
right?
Really kind of seeing how everything was and understanding how he was training the horses. And he actually, one of the horses he had in the barn, was it Awesome Patriot? He ran him in the Kentucky Derby that spring. I think the horse was Awesome Patriot. It was an Awesome, again, chestnut. So it was interesting really to kind of see a guy who had also spent time in the US. He's English, but he'd spent time in the US and trained in the US, and then went back to England. So learned a lot about the differences of hill work and putting more mileage into horses and spending more time teaching them to relax on the racetrack, and the different types of work that you can do to condition a horse. Then went on, spent some time in the Godolphin stable in Dubai. Also spent time with now Melbourne Cup winning trainer Danny O'Brien in Australia. And that was probably the hugest eye-opening experience, was just seeing how they did it. So I took a lot from my time overseas, not just on a training front. And I think, you know, a lot of people think the industry is partitioned, right? It's training, and it's bloodstock, and it's sales, and it's this. Well, what few people realize is training's everything. right? You're training the finished product, you're training the athletes. And an owner was just talking to me the other day saying, well, he bought 14 horses out of Europe and brought them to the US and they didn't work out. And I said, well, the key to buying a horse out of Europe is buying a horse that has a conformation that can hold up to training on dirt in the United States. I said the biggest difference in a European horse is a lot of it's undulating ground, it's hill training, it's softer ground, it's polytrack, some of it's turf. Some of the conformational flaws you can let go in Europe are disastrous when they come to the United States because of the pounding that they take on the dirt. And so seeing the race horses in the barn, and we saw stallions, and I went to horse sales and you know, worked at different horse sales, looking at horses and inspecting horses with, you know, like Mark Johnston, who's one of the top trainers in Europe, one of the best at picking out a young horse. Spent time going to sales with him. So you'd learn the different types of horses that you can import. You'd learn what horses excel over there, which ones could excel over here. It kind of finished the picture, I guess, in terms of seeing all that. And I think unless you've done it, it's really hard to kind of say, okay, I understand how to buy a horse out of Europe, because there's so many that a lot of people buy and they come here and they get injured and you never hear of them.
Right. We hear, you know, it's just a nuance of the game, how it works. You know, you hear about the successful ones and the ones that are running and win stakes, and you know, some of the high profile barns are known for importing European horses and having success, but you're only seeing the ones that win and that have the success. The ones that don't get to the gate, you know, nobody hears about, you know. So it's percentage wise a lot tougher than people realize, you know, because we're only seeing the success stories. You know, nobody brags about the failures.
Well, and it's also, I mean, you know, because you're, you know, an expert at handicapping, it's understanding European form lines too. And so even as a trainer, I would get called by agents of, hey, you know, this horse broke its maiden and, you know, we're wanting 160,000 euro for it. And I'm like, no, it's not worth that. And they're like, what do you mean it's not worth that? It won well at Newbury. And I'm like, okay, it won well at Newbury and it ran a 70 time form rating. And this horse is not going to be able to compete in the US. I said, don't worry about it. I'll let somebody else spend the 160,000 euro and I'll claim the horse for 20,000 after it runs poorly twice.
Right.
You know, and so those are the things. You do see a lot of European horses in the United States. Some are bumping around the claiming ranks. And so that's the other big piece of, you know, what does a good horse look like? And obviously they don't function off the clock. And even if you are functioning off the clock in different parts of the world, you have to know how those tracks play. Are they speed favoring? Are they deep? Whatever. So there's so much in the international knowledge that unless you've kind of experienced firsthand, you're really playing a guessing game.
Now we got to get to Forza, and we will. But there's another thing that I want to ask you about, and I hope you're going to remember it and know what I'm talking about right off the way. The Horse Whisperer story.
Oh,
A little bit of a Horse Whisperer story. That there was a connection way back when, early in your life.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, and then I promise we'll get to Forza.
Okay, so I got in the horse business because one summer there was some swimmers from the swim team working at a local horse farm. And at that point, all I wanted to do was be a zoologist. I was volunteering in zoos and working with, you know, lions and gorillas and all sorts of stuff. So they said, well, you know, we could use some help moving hay bales and things. I said, okay, well, I'll come on out. So I went on out, was still at that point kind of scared of horses, wasn't quite sure.
So you've been like next to gorillas and lions and was scared of horses?
Well, that's a lot of it comes from my dad taking me to the vet clinic, probably when I'm too young. So I used to be very sensitive to noise. And so there was a stallion barn at UC Davis that was concrete cinder block. And when the stallions would scream and just reverberate off the walls, scared the shit out of me. Sorry for my language, but I think a lot of that stuck. So I started working hands-on with the horses, still was a bit tentative. And then one day there was a foal and the farm manager couldn't catch it. None of the staff could catch it. And I said, do you mind if I give it a try? And they said, you know, sure, you know, nobody else is able to do it, so why not? So I said, well, horses like grain. I'm just going to get a bucket of grain, go out and sit in a paddock. So I grabbed the bucket of grain, walked out there, and the foal walked over to me. And then I started feeding him, you know, I threw it a little bit, you know, within 5 feet of me, and he ate a little bit and came a little bit closer and a little bit closer. And then he ate out of my hand. And then I pet him while he was eating, and I stood up slowly and I slipped the halter on him, and then I walked him over to the farm manager. So that was the point actually where I decided to kind of be a horse trainer, because she says, you should be a racehorse trainer. I said, well, that sounds fun. It's sports, it's horses. I was an athlete at the time. And so that's kind of how really the horse career kicked off.
Cool. I always like that story. I'm an animal lover, so I love any type of connection with animals. I work with a lot of dogs and stuff that have been abused and mistreated, and when you break through and make that connection, it's special. It's like nothing like it. You know what I mean?
No, I agree. Yeah, when you really connect with, I mean, there's horses I've trained that I have soft spots to this day for, and I go visit them at the farms around Kentucky, because you just have a connection with them. That it was always with the fillies in my barn, and Dominique would always tell me, she's like, this filly's mean, and then I'd go over to her and she wouldn't do anything to me, and the grooms would complain about certain horses, and I'd get along fine with them. Yeah, once you have that connection and they trust you, and it's nothing like it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you learn that animals have an innate sense of, I don't know, lack of a better term, who their friends are and who they aren't sometimes. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's kind of instinctive,
Yeah.
Okay. Forza owners, bloodstock agents, sales, so much to talk about, but I want to start with, what do you think are the major obstacles for an owner to find success, either at the sales or through a syndicate or through a bloodstock agent? Because we know that so few are financially successful. What are the major obstacles that you see preventing a higher, it's always going to be tough, we know it's a tough game,
Right.
but a higher percentage of owners being successful than what we see today?
I think the biggest thing is horse racing has a massive learning curve, right? So I got into the business obviously in 2004. I graduated high school 2004. So that's kind of, so what, we're 18 years in now. So the learning curve is so big. And I think the biggest piece is, you have to know that you don't know certain things, and then you have to work with people who do know, but it's hard to judge who knows, right? Because some of the stats that we keep on trainers and some of the stats that we keep, we keep no stats on agents at sales.
That's probably a good thing for most of the agents, even the ones with big horses on their resumes.
With big bankrolls. Yeah, I think sometimes, yeah. So for me, the biggest thing is, I think you have to understand what you're looking at first off, right? And understand horses and horse conformation. Then you have to understand what type of horse you want. Then you have to understand what value looks like, right? When are you paying too much? When are you getting a deal? Why are you getting a deal? Who is connected with who? Are the horses that you're looking at a cull from somebody, and you're really not wanting to look at them because there's a reason they're getting rid of them? And then one of the biggest things, and it's something that I think it's a huge asset that we bring to the table, is veterinary findings on some of these horses, right? So a lot of people will, we looked at a really nice filly this summer for a client, and he wasn't necessarily interested in her because she has a 2A throat. It wasn't a 1. Well, 2A means it functions normally. It's just a little bit asynchronous at rest. So it's not a performance inhibitor. Any grade of throat, 1 through 2, any grade can always go worse. You can have a horse with a grade, 1A throat, and it could eventually become a 3. It could be non-functional. And so this specific owner, and there's a lot of 2As that stay 2As. So it's understanding what you can live with and what is acceptable. And hey, actually, maybe this bone bruising on this yearling is not a problem, and we can actually get it at a discount. We helped find a horse, several horses at the Keeneland sale for a guy who pin hooks out of Europe, and he's got a filly that he thinks is going to be one of the top in the Dubai breeze up sales. And she had some I think she had some bruising in her sesamoids. There was something, we scanned it looked okay on the scans, but it was just something where it would be time would fix it. And then obviously he trains in Ireland, so the ground there is not going to cause any further damage to something like that. And so I think the biggest thing is and it's hard, right? You can go, there's no Google listings. I mean, I do Google listings. There's no, when you go to an Indian restaurant, if it's good or not, because a lot of people have commented on it. Horse racing does not have that amount of transparency. So I think it's the biggest barrier for owners when they get into a sales environment is understanding who they're working with and that those people do know what they know and that they're trustworthy. I think though, maybe even going further off your question is there's a huge gap. And that's why we've created the service that we have had is there's guys who can select horses, but then those horses go to the trainer that the owner selected, right? Sometimes certain horses need to go to certain trainers or they need to go to certain jurisdictions. There was a horse bought this summer. We selected one for the client and another agent selected another for the client. And that horse was going to California. That horse was on our short list. We liked him. A trainer came up and wanted to bring in a partner, one of his owners, to partner in on the horse. And so that way he could secure the horse and the horse could go to California. The horse, the way that he moved through his knee, I didn't like because knowing how the California surface is and how deep it is out there, I felt it would turn into an eventual problem. Now, if that horse was in Kentucky, I wouldn't worry about it. If it was in New York, I wouldn't worry about it. And then it's also programs. The way that trainer runs his program is not going to lend to that horse being successful as well. So there are massive pieces in this business that one minor decision can create a chain reaction of events that you never intended.
Right, and I'm glad you pointed out that connection and how that ties in, because that's something I always thought was important. I always thought that, picking out a horse, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't think you're going to say so, because I think you kind of alluded to the same thing, but picking out a horse, and I look at the sales and like to pick out horses, not for any clients or anybody to buy, just for my own knowledge to see, hey, I like this one, I would have bought this one. Or I would have recommended somebody to buy this one, and then I'll follow them to see if they're successful or not, and one of the things that I think is very important, and I don't know how much of what a lot of bloodstock agents do go into these thoughts, but who's getting the horse? What trainer is the horse going to be sent to? Will this horse fit their type of program and the kind of races that they go after? What circuit they race on? Does the horse fit that type of circuit? And things like that, and I think that's important. I think it's a multifaceted decision. I think that those answers should play into the kind of horse you're selecting for somebody.
Well, and I think it even goes several steps further too, in terms of, so at the sales, and this is something, again, like when I was in college, I volunteered in the farrier shop at the UC Davis Vet School, because I said, well, look, if there's horses with major feet issues, it's going to be at a veterinary, school, and these blacksmiths will be some of the best. So I very much learned how to look at horses and look at horses' feet and how to treat them and how to fix them, and whether it was a horse with founders. So when we go to the sales, and this takes a lot of time and a lot of experience, I can see a horse walk out of the stall and tell you if it's shod properly or not. There are times where horses will be shod improperly, so the horse isn't moving properly, or it might be trying to hide that the horse toes in a little bit, so they left the inside heel a little bit long. Because if you leave the inside heel long, it pivots the toe outwards. Okay, so understanding that, okay, this is a sales horse. This is what's going on with the shoeing right now. This horse is going to go into this environment. Like, you even need to go one step further and know who the trainer's blacksmith is. And so, that's the same thing of me training on different circuits. I know who guys work with. I know who their vets are. I know who their blacksmiths are. And so I can say, look, this horse is actually not long-toed, low-heeled, but if he stays long-toed, low-heeled, more than likely he's going to bow attended. And so I don't want him going to that circuit and that barn with that blacksmith, even if the trainer is good, because
Right.
it just increases the risk. And so what we try and do with everything we do is minimize risk as much as possible for any owner by doing a thought out process before we invest any money in anything for anybody.
I'm glad you mentioned this, and this is a little bit of, I don't know that taboo is the right word for this, but I think we should talk about it a little bit because really nobody does. Okay.
Okay.
And I think it warrants talking about when you know when you hear that we need more transparency at the sales. Most of the time you hear people talk about, well, you have bloodstock agents that are taking commissions, buying and selling, you know, from both sides of the coin,
Right.
which, if nothing else, is a little bit unethical, especially I think if you don't disclose it up front. Okay, but I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to go to something that I experienced years ago when I went to the sales at Saratoga with somebody who was very savvy and had been around the game a long time and kind of knew where all the bodies were buried, you know. And and this is many years ago, and I don't know how much things have changed. Maybe you'll shed some light on it. I really don't think they've changed all that much. But this is somebody who knew where most of the bodies were buried. Maybe not all, but certainly most.
Right.
And you know, we went to the sale, and you know, they were kind of schooling me and joking around with me. And you know, the first joke they told me is, listen, when we go in there and sit down, whatever you do, don't sneeze, don't wipe your eye, don't nothing, because we may wind up having to write a big check in there if they think you're bidding on one of these horses. And that was just a joke, but you know, I kind of got it. I'm like, no problem. I'll behave like a gentleman. You know what I mean? I'm not here to buy a horse. He goes, well, if we see something you like and you know you want me to buy it, I'll buy it and we can work it out when we get back home. I'm like, no, I'm not here to buy. I'm here to learn. You know. He goes, well, let me tell you. He goes, a lot of these horses, especially some of the ones that go for big money. He goes, don't kid yourself. He goes, they're sold before they go into the ring. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, because these agents and these consigners, they work together, a lot of them. They hype a lot of horses up. They work them fast at the sales. They inflate, they speed up the works at the sales. They know when to work them, what lane on the track to work them. He goes, there's a million ways that they can make a horse look a lot faster than he is. I'm like, you're kidding me. He goes, yeah. He goes, and you got the richest people in the world here that are the most savvy in their businesses. And they come here with that Derby dream or that Breeders' Cup dream or whatever the dream it is. And it clouds their mind, clouds their head. And they just spend 10 times more than they should. And he goes, believe me, he goes, a sharp guy can go through these sales books and know, no matter how good they look, cross off this one, cross off that one, cross off that one, because the prices are going to be inflated and you're going to have to bid some guy that doesn't even want the horse. He's just driving the price up for somebody else.
Right.
Wow. This is dirty business. You know, he goes, that's not the half of it. He goes, I could tell you stories where you'll have an owner sitting back at the barn after he spent $500,000. Now you got to realize this is many years ago. So $500,000 then was probably like 2 million today. He goes, you got an owner sitting there saying, I spent $500,000 on this horse. He goes, the stupid vet sent me 22 pictures of that damn ankle. Not one of them showed the chip. He took every angle, but the one that showed where the chip was, you know, now he's got a horse with a chip, you know. He's like, there was so many things that go on at these sales that these savvy business people that know everything in their businesses just get rope-a-dope like they're like they're just novices. And I was fascinated by that. And nobody really talks about that. Because of and what fascinated me was not that it might not be as transparent and on the up as you think, but what fascinated me by it as somebody who is not only a student of the game, but just a people watcher and study things and just loves to learn and absorb, was that, you know, the interesting thing to me was that, yeah, these are people that are enormously successful in different businesses and are complete, W.C. Fields' term, just suckers when they go to the sales. You know what I mean? Like, how do they not see through that? How do they not know, hey, listen, I don't want to do business with this one, that one. And it just amazed me. And again, many years ago. Don't know how much has changed, if anything at all, or if those kind of things still go on. I tend to think probably so. But nobody really talks about that aspect of the sales. That's kind of like the taboo. Oh, we don't go there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I hear you.
Thoughts,
And
comments. What's your take on?
yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, the biggest thing is knowing who you're buying from. There's certain consigners, and I mean, we are very, I try and do things in the right way around people, right? So I'll look at a horse, I'll watch it walk out, and I'm like, this horse is sore here, it's probably sore there. And then I'll ask Dominique to go in the stall. And luckily I've got, Dominique's a veterinarian, an equine veterinarian, who worked for me on the racetrack as an equine vet. And so I've got on our team in Forza, we have a vet on my side, and we inspect all the horses together. So we can narrow down horses off lists extremely quickly. And typically, because she's licensed in most states, we'll scope horses just to get some of the groundwork out from underneath it. But there will be times, I'll look at a horse and I know what's wrong with it. I'm not going to let everybody else at the sales know what's wrong with it. So I ask them to put the horse in the stall, and then, we go in and we inspect the horse, and we look at the horse, and I'll pick up the feet and I'll look at the shoeing, and we'll do our due diligence on everything. And I think so yes, it's kind of like, man, you got to know who you're working with. There's certain consigners that I would go to bat for because they're honest, they're great people. I love those individuals, and there's others where I'm like, okay, and right. If you see a great horse in their consignment, you kind of have to be like, think about it twice. Some scenarios, Dominique, obviously, again, Dominique, and she's not the only vet on our sales team, right? So Dominique, we tend to knock out most of the work through Dominique. She'll get the repository up on her phone. She'll look at the radiographs. She'll look at the vet report right there. We'll get a good idea. But then we have sales vets that we then bring in for second and third opinions. Case in point, right? So this summer.
See, I think that's huge. Just let me interrupt you. I think having an agency that has a vet on staff that's part of them, that's not, let's just put me in the role of a buyer, and I'm saying, hey, pick me out a horse, and you like this horse, you say, okay, we're going to hire this vet to vet the horse. They're an independent vet. All right, they're working for us on this particular case, but I don't know their other relationships. I don't know their ties. I don't know. I don't have that comfortable feeling that I'm going to write a $1, $2, $3 million, $200,000 check based on what that vet is saying, that they truly have my best interest at heart, as opposed to theirs, who are getting paid by me and 100 other people. And for all I know, maybe the consigner, maybe someone else, 20 pictures of the ankle, none of them showed the chip. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. If I'm with Forza and Dominique is with you, that's your reputation. So she's not going to miss that chip, and she's certainly not going to conceal it from me. She's going to say, hey, listen, pass that one up.
Yeah, no, and that's, and the nice thing is we can look at them and say, oh, they've angled it this way, they've angled it that way. And then we will then go send our own vet, third party, to re-radiograph the horse. And so case in point, like this summer, and this is a prime example. So when I say our biggest strength is on turning, we minimize the misses, right? You don't, and this can go back into the business structure, which we'll talk about later. We don't have to buy horses because we're not living off of a 5% commission on buying a horse. So we can go to sales and walk away from numerous horses because we don't need them. If they don't fit the owner and we don't think it fits, we don't have to worry about our travel being covered. We don't have to worry about how we're getting home. We don't have to worry about, oh, we struck out the sale, we spent 4 days, we got to have to pay for our plane tickets, we had to pay for our hotel, we had to pay for this, and now we don't have any money to cover it because we didn't buy a horse, right?
Those guys have to buy a horse.
They have to buy a horse in a lot of scenarios.
And I'm glad you mentioned that, because the next question I was going to ask you, and I think we should expand on that now, because you mentioned it, is what makes Forza different than a traditional agency. And I think part of that is that you're not living off that 5% commission. So you're at a sale, and that's not your bread and butter, so to speak. So talk a little about that and the structure and how you make money and how the way you make money also protects your clients as opposed to the alternative.
And I'll get into that because I want to tell a quick story about something that happened this summer. So we found a really nice New York bred, and this is what I mean by minimizing misses. We found a really nice New York bred filly this summer at the New York Bred Select Sale at Saratoga. We loved her. We thought she was one of the best fillies in the sale. Client loved her. We looked at the radiographs and we didn't like how the condyle looked. And it wasn't something where it was going to be something that, it's something where it could go either way on this horse. It's either going to be fine or it's not. So it's a 50-50 split. So we brought in, we sent those radiographs to 3 different vets. Okay. And the biggest thing is probably because most of the top vets in the world were one of my dad's students at one point. We have a vast network of people, and he's got a vast network of colleagues. If I'm at a sale and I like a horse and our sales vets are a little bit funny, and they're like, we don't know, I can instantly text Larry Bramlage and send him the radiographs, and Larry can look at them, and then give me his opinion. And then I got 3 opinions from some of the top, sales vets and the top surgeon in the country. And so we looked at this filly and we're like, gosh, we love this filly. She's really nice. She was better, actually. She was probably the best filly of the 2 sales. She was the one. We got 2 really nice colts out of the Saratoga Select, the premier sale. But the New York bred sale, this one was probably better than the fillies that were in the actual select sale. So we were kind of like, gosh, it's a New York bred. She's really nice. We're not sure about this. So we dig deeper and we dig deeper and we find out that the horse had had its ankle injected twice just to get it sound enough to be at the sale. So in that case, we said, screw it. We're walking away from it. And so that's where, that's how deep we can get to get information on horses to then understand, okay, because you're taking a snapshot in a horse's life at the sale, right? You're looking at it in a 3-day period of its lifespan. So there are issues that pop up before the sales that are treated prior to the sales. We're able to get all that information so we can even make better decisions. But anyway, so that was just a case in point where we say, so going back to that though, somebody spent $235,000 on that horse.
Right.
So to me, I'd rather have a client spend $2,000 to $3,000 vetting a horse to be 100% sure and not buy it than spend $235,000 and the horse never runs.
Right. And I think it's tough to argue against that philosophy.
So we were talking about how we work as a business and how it's structured.
Right. The business model and away from that 5%. Putting a person in a position where I got to buy a horse to pay my expenses going to the sale.
Yeah, so I think, for me, it's more or less, as we discussed, right? The learning curve in the game is huge. So I wanted to try and create an enterprise that serviced the gamut, right? So I said, okay, well then how do we do that? And the more conversations I had with owners, some had bloodstock agents that they currently worked with. That's fine. Some had racing managers, some had different people in different positions, but not everybody had somebody that they could turn to for everything. And so I said, well, what if we create a service? And this obviously has to be based off the size of their business and how much time that they're going to use and at the price point that they buy horses, and basically looking at how do we create packages for each owner, which we do customize packages for each owner, right? So if somebody comes to us and say, well, we've got 5 racehorses, but we want to work with you. Well, that's very different than other clients where they've got 50 horses and it's full management where we're watching, checking on the horses once a month, watching them breeze, coordinating races with the trainer, being the one selecting horses. It's very different, but that's why each conversation is we sit down with a client. We're like, what are your goals in the business? Okay. How much do you want to invest? Now, and I got an email yesterday from somebody saying, I want to get in the business. And, I've been hesitant for a while, but I really kind of want to jump in now. And this is how much I want to invest. And I said, So here's my next question. Is that the investment for horses, or is that the investment for a year? Because here's another thing that I don't think owners think about, that it's going to cost you $4,000 to $5,000 a month to take care of those horses. So when we sit down, it's okay, what are your goals? How much money do you want to invest? Where do you want to see this endeavor go over time? We get a read for their personalities. We understand them by the end of the call, and we'll do multiple calls if we need to. But based on what they say, we can then say, okay, this is probably the amount of time you need per month, and these are the sales we need to go to, or you need to come in the game the claiming route because it's going to be most cost effective for you. And that's another piece that we offer that most agents can't. I mean, I was known in New York for claiming horses and turning them around, and Florida. And so I'm able, if an owner says, look, I got 200,000 and I want to get into the horse business, the last thing I'm going to do is take them to a yearling sale.
Right.
Because there's no point in buying two $100,000 yearlings and none of them can run, and he's wasted his money. It's much better for me to go and
spending $5,000 a month on each one for a year before he even knows that they can't run.
Yeah, it's better for me to say, okay, well, look, let's do this. Let me claim you 5 $20,000 horses, and let's keep that other 100 grand sitting there to pay the expenses on those horses. And let's select the right claiming horses, and let's put them in the right barns, and let's make sure we're aggressive in their placement so these horses pay for themselves and have the chance to actually make some money. And then we can roll that into other things that we then invest in down the road. Or I put you in, we claim you 3 horses and we put you in a partnership for 2, with a bigger partnership or whatever. So a lot of it is, what does the client want? And then advising them properly on how to manage their money so then they can actually come out ahead of the game versus getting behind the 8th ball. So I guess if that answers your question, so that would be how we make money, is basically advising. And we can be brought in. I mean, it's not just advising. There's people that we do full scale management for. And that's kind of where it helps the little guy, because instead of, Godolphin has a racing manager, they've got agents that they have employed underneath the banner. You now have all of that at a fraction of the cost. You don't have to pay 5 full-time salaries. So it helps guys who might be in a position of small, medium, breaking through to large, to not have to put a ton of hefty salaries on a payroll. You can outsource it to us and we can handle it.
Right. I think it's a great concept. I really believe in it. I love what you're doing. Where do you see Forza 2 years from now?
I mean, I think, as with everything I want to do, I like to be at the top, at the top of the barrel, to say. I think from an experience standpoint, we're there. I think from what we bring to the table, we're there. I mean, if you were to go down and look at my short list, and this is where I say at the sales, when it comes to buying the top horses, it's just about who has the most money. So if you look at my short list, and I joked with Donato at Keeneland, and I said, you're either following me because you bought everything off my short list. So, we beat him out on a couple, but there's situations where we're already there. Now it's kind of like a kid who was the top player in college, although I've been in this game for a long time. You get to the pros, you got to have a breakout rookie year, and you got to produce, and then you got to keep going forward. So we have the skill sets to be there. We're already there in terms of, I think we're on par with most of the top guys. Now it's just being able to put those results on the racetrack with the horses that we buy and manage, and go from there.
So 2 years, steady growth, bigger client base, bigger name recognition. Fair to say?
Yeah, I think that's not, I mean, my work ethic and how Dominique works, and everybody that I want to bring into the team with their work ethics, I think it's going to happen. It's just a matter of how long. How long did it take Michael Jordan to win a championship, right? You just got to put the right pieces in play and get the team to work together. So for me, and I don't want to get to a point where it's too huge, because what I really enjoy is having those one-on-one relationships with the clients. and really being the guy kind of hands-on working with them and being around the horses and doing that. So, but yeah, I mean, I want at a certain point in time people to say they're the best in the game and you can't beat them.
I'm going to ask you a question that I think you're going to answer the way that I expect, but I'm not sure of it. But if you don't, I'm going to help you because I think I know the right answer and it may not hit you right away, and that's okay because it's a trick question, and it's been asked to me, and I think I know how to answer it. So that's why I'm going to help you if I think that you didn't answer it in the best way possible.
Gotcha.
Because again, it is a trick question. But what I want to ask you is, how do you ensure transparency and openness in your relationship with your clients, which you know will ultimately get out within the industry because people talk,
Right.
they talk
Yeah.
about success. How do you ensure that, but yet not give away anything that would be considered proprietary or that is something that you may not want a competitor to know, and we both know you can't tell your owner, hey, listen, this is that, that's that, but don't say anything because they're going to say something.
Oh, for sure.
How do you ensure that? How do you balance that? Trick question. I told you going in.
No. And my gut reaction might not be so I think you could take Michael Jordan and have Michael Jordan teach every player in the NBA, and Michael Jordan is still better. Okay. So my point to that is the transparency stuff for me is huge. It's who I am. It's who Dominique is. It's who my father is. And as you and I are talking, of your involvement, you're a very honest guy too. So I only want to bring in people who tell the truth, number one, to where it's just who they are at their core. Then comes the communication, right? So communicating that. So if I look at a horse and I say, okay, this horse probably is stakes caliber, but probably not stakes caliber come spring, needs to run at New York in the winter, needs to do X, Y, and Z. These are the 3 or 4 races we can point for, and then we should probably decide to do this. That's information they can utilize. I want to give the owners as much information as possible, even if it's information overload, to where they actually have everything they need to make what they feel is the right decision. I don't want to force somebody into a decision. I kind of have an idea of what's probably going to work out, but if that's not what they want to do, that's okay. Because if things don't work out, we can always then go back to the drawing board and fix it. So I'm not worried about somebody saying, oh, I know how they run their business, I can go do it too. That's fine. If you want to, well, then it helps the whole industry as a whole. I'd prefer the industry more towards a model like this, to where people are looking out for the owners in the game, so we'd have a lot more of them. And then there'd be plenty of business to go around. And I think what happens in this game far too often is this scarcity mindset, right? Of, oh, nobody can know my clients because then they might call my clients, or nobody can know this because they might be better than me. But if they're better than you, they're better than you, and they're going to get better than you anyways. And so instead of holding everything to yourself, and Dominique knows this too, and I think you might know it as well, I'm a huge teacher, right? So the last sale I had a Flying Start student go around with me. The sale before, I had, a student from UK. The guy wants to be, his goal is to be a GM at a racetrack one day. So I like teaching people, and that's just naturally, my father's a teacher. I like to do that. So if my business might take a financial hit down the road because I've developed a lot of competition out there, so be it. But don't think for 1 second that I'm going to take my foot off the gas and not be the guy who's still trying to get better every day.
Right. And you kind of alluded to what I was looking for. So I would say if I was the teacher and you were the student and this was a test question, I would say you're getting partial credit because you hit it, but you didn't knock it out of the park. And I'll tell you why, but it's still good. When you started with the Michael Jordan comparison, that he could teach everybody, how to play basketball, but they're still going to be Michael Jordan. My thought is this, okay? If you use Forza, and I say this to people who come to me for handicapping advice, and they say, well, why listen to you, or why listen to Michael Wilson instead of anybody else? Okay. And here's what I say to those people, because my record speaks for itself. Michael's knowledge, record, and background speaks for itself. You can only get Michael's opinion at Forza. You can only get my opinion from me. So I don't have any trade or proprietary secrets to protect, because if you ask me a question about a race today, I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to give you my analysis on that particular race. That will not apply to a race tomorrow, because every race, like every horse, is different. If you want to know what I think, you can only get it from me. If you want to know what Michael and Forza think, you can only get it from them. So if you have an owner that says, hey, this is what Forza told me about this horse, and this is what they looked for, and this is how they found it, that's great. But that might not be what you look for on that next horse, where you see the angle of those radiographs was taken from a way that you don't like we spoke about earlier. And now you're going to, so Michael's opinion, you can only get from Michael. You know what I mean? My opinion, you can only get from me. Forza's philosophy and outlook and team of core people that they bring together, where can you get it? From Forza. Doesn't matter if anybody else knows what you do. They're not you.
No, and I think you hit that on the head, because it was interesting. It's weird. I had two separate conversations with two owners that have been in the business for 30 plus years. And this was the last week and the week before. And the one thing they both said is, your resume and background is unparalleled. You can't buy this type of experience. I said, yes, you can. You can hire us.
Right.
It's, but it's, and again, you learn based on experience. And I've been fortunate. I worked hard for it, right? I mean, I targeted those trainers. I somehow convinced them to give me a job. Then I busted my ass when I worked for them. And so am I blessed that I got those opportunities? Absolutely. I worked very hard for them, but to deal with 40 plus grade one horses, to deal with two of the best stallion in the United States right now, I worked with, Into Mischief, I worked with when he was 2, I worked with when he was 3. So Pioneer the Nile, again, another top sire, so you don't get that without doing it. And it's kind of, I think you hit the nail right on the head. And it was interesting because I had another client that was a client of mine as a trainer, who is also involved with us in Forza. And we went around the sales. I said, you want to look at broodmares? He says, sure. He says, foals I enjoy. He said, but I'll look at broodmares. I said, okay, I'm going to show you a bunch of broodmares. And he said, okay. So I said, I've only put on the list stakes, stakes placed, stakes winners, graded stakes placed, or graded stakes winners. Okay. We looked at all those horses. I said, do you see any commonalities? He said, well, I see certain things like this and like this and like this. And I explained, I said, well, this is what all these horses have in common. Okay. And this is the thing you might not have seen. But yes, this hind leg might be different, or that left knee might be different, or that hip angle might be different, or that shoulder angle might be different, and their overstep might not be as big as the one before it. I said, but they all share a common trait that you only see in stakes and graded stakes horses. And I said, here's the beauty of it, Vince. When you know what to look for, because you have worked with those horses in a racing environment, all you do is rewind 2 years. And then you go find them as a yearling. The one thing, and I'm not trying to knock people, because there's a lot of guys that I know who have been at the track, right? Alex Solis was running around the racetrack when I was working for Richard Mandela. The guy knows his stuff. He's really good. Okay. I know Donato really knows how to pick out horses. I think Jacob West is very good as well. Same thing with, I don't know why I'm blanking on his name right now. Anyways, it'll come. David Gordo, he was at the racetrack too. So it's funny, if you look at most guys who have excelled in bloodstock, they were at the racetrack at one stage and they understood what a good horse looked like. And then you just rewind it. So to me, it's interesting when I see guys that have never worked in a racing environment going and buying yearlings. I'm like, how do you know what to look for? Because you don't know what the finished product is. When you know what the finished product is, and not just how they move or how their conformation works together, but what those horses have to have, the confidence, the presence, the mannerisms. You know, we were splitting hairs on a Pioneer of the Nile colt this summer for a client, and the client's like, I like that one. And I said, this one's not as pretty, but can I explain why I like this one? And he says, well, why do you like that one? I said, that horse looks a lot like his father. He behaves a lot like his father, and he moves a lot like his father. If I was going to go one way, I'd go with that one. And so, even case in point, right? Because then a lot of agents do a ton of work. So, you know, so again, you also have to know those sires, what they produce. So there's certain horses where, so people talk about Candy Ride, and Candy Ride throws the same hock on all these horses. And it's actually interesting. If you look, it's not necessarily his hock. They all have a slightly longer tibia. It's just a little bit longer, which is why the hock is slightly camped out. And that bone is just slightly longer. And it's through the line, and most of the good ones have it. So once you know what these stallions produce, then you also know, okay, what does a good Candy Ride look like? What does this look like? And again, it's just, you said it, it's volume of knowledge, and you can only get that from a certain source.
It's interesting because it's the same with the handicapping and the betting side of this game, and it's one of the reasons where, you know, not to disparage or knock anybody, but you have a lot of analysts and so-called experts in this game that are giving out horses, and oh, I picked this one, and this is my top pick, and this is my other pick, and they're not betting. If you're not betting, you have no pick. And if you've never bet, you have no pick. You know what I mean? You know, the only way you learn about betting is by betting. You know, I can't teach you how to bet and teach you how to handicap if you don't bet and handicap. You know, no matter how much I tell you, until you actually start making wagers based on your own interpretation of the information, you're never going to learn. You know what I mean? No matter how much I tell you, you have to bet, lose, win, and experience it to really have any kind of meaningful opinion going forward.
Well, and you said that right, and I can tell you, a lot of people, and it's interesting. So somebody asked me the other day, is there a confirmation that you will knock a horse out for? I said no. I said there's not one specific type of confirmation that I will fail a horse for. And they said, well, why? I said, because it's how the horse moves with that confirmation. If they move how I think they should move, and yes, when I was in college, I studied equine biomechanics. So I can look at a horse and know how that horse should move for its confirmation. And then if it doesn't move that way, then I start investigating why. So normally, and there's a whole lot, and I could go into real depth on this on a different way of how I do that, but it's the same thing when I watch a race with a racehorse. I can look at a horse and say, that horse is moving short in front. And my dad will, you know, who's a very good vet, and I love him, he says, well, how do you know that that's not just that horse confirmation? I said, I bet you, because look at this angle and look at this and look at that, it should have a longer extension. It's sore somewhere. A horse will walk off the track and it's got big ankles. I said, that's why it's not extending out. So that all goes into play. And that's why I was good at claiming horses, was I would watch horses, and I'd watch from their, if I could find a breeze video from a breeze sale, I'd watch from their first race all the way to their most recent race. And I would look and say, is there a change in their stride? And if there's a change in their stride, I could pinpoint which leg and kind of have an idea of what we're dealing with. If there wasn't, I said, oh, this horse just needs a confidence boost. That's easy. You know, this horse has just gotten beat too many times, and it's running poorly and you're talking about being in it, right? I've worked with countless world-beating horses that never broke their maiden, because it's not about talent. The one thing, and it goes to any athlete in any sport, it goes to mental toughness and ability to tough it out. And it's the one thing that you see it throughout horse racing, right? You'll see horses go wire to wire by 10, wire to wire by 8, wire to wire by 6. And the first time a horse looks them in the eye, they run out the back of the pack.
Right.
You know, and anyways, we could go on forever. But
No,
yeah,
I agree, and those are fascinating nuances and parts of the sport and some of the reasons why we love it. We could go on all day. Like I said, that's a problem when you and I, as passionate as we are, talk. Forza, the name, where'd it come from?
yeah, no. So obviously, you would know it's Italian, and it kind of came. So Dominique kind of has said multiple times, right? When I set my mind to something, I kind of become like a force of nature. I dive all in. I work as hard as I can. I study as much as I can. I mean, so she's like, well, maybe something with force, right? So it really represents you. And we're like, yeah, but force just doesn't sound good. And so she said, well, what about Forza? And let's look it up. Let's look up the definition. And then the definition perfectly fit. And so, obviously, as you would know, it's kind of like the ability to face the difficulties of life is kind of what it boils down to, or come on, you can do it. So I said, well, that's perfect. We'll use that.
Yeah, no, I like it. I like it. I like the logo. I like the branding. I like it. I like everything you're doing. I think that's a pretty good introduction into Forza, what you're offering, what's going to be coming out, and what is already out and available for people to look at. Once this video is live and posted, I'll put a link to the Forza website down there underneath it, so people can find it easily. And all the best. I look forward to whatever involvement there may be for me in working with you guys and watching the growth and watching the success and rooting along the way. I may buy a horse with you guys. Who knows?
Yeah, well, that'll be fun. Well, we can start running together at Gulfstream. We'll be down there for the Gulfstream sale. So since that's your neck of the woods, maybe you could teach us a little bit about Miami.
I certainly could. All right, well, we'll stop the show now, and then we'll say goodbye off the camera, and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Nobody does it better.